I wanted to give my family the life they deserve, but who kept leaving notes pushing me forward every time I was ready to quit. I found a small, handwritten note tucked into my steering wheel the morning I was driving to the city to pawn my grandfather's watch just to pay the heating bill. It didn't say much, just 5 words that felt like a slap in the face: the world hasn't seen you yet. At 28, I was a man who felt like a ghost, living in a house of quiet desperation with my parents, David, 56, and Elena, 54, both of whom had worked their bodies into the ground just to keep a roof over our heads that was currently leaking in 3 places. My life was a series of almosts and not quites. I had the degree, I had the drive, but every door I knocked on seemed to be locked from the inside. I spent my days working a dead-end job at a local warehouse and my nights hunched over a laptop, trying to build a freelance consultancy that no one seemed to want. The guilt was a physical weight on my chest every time I saw David winced while sitting down or caught Elena counting the loose change in a jar for groceries. I was ready to throw in the towel that Tuesday. I had the watch in my pocket and a resignation letter in my bag. I was going to take a full-time night shift at the mill, effectively burying my dreams to ensure we had bread on the table. But that note changed the frequency of my day. It wasn't just the words, it was the paper, a heavy, cream-colored cardstock that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. How would you feel if a total stranger seemed to know exactly when your spirit was about to break? The notes didn't stop. A week later, when a major client rejected my proposal and I sat in my car in the rain, ready to delete my website, I found a slip of paper under my windshield wiper. It said, "Precision is your weapon, Leo." Reread the 3rd paragraph. I went home, looked at the proposal, and realized I had missed a decimal point that changed the entire valuation of the project. I fixed it, resent it, and 48 hours later, I had my first $3,000 deposit. I started looking for the source. I checked security cameras at the gas station, I scanned the crowds at the grocery store, but the notes appeared like magic. They were always there when the darkness felt too thick to breathe through. When my brother Julian, 31, came around asking for money he knew we didn't have, and I was on the verge of losing my temper and my mind, I found a note in my jacket pocket: "Anger is a leak in your engine. Keep the pressure for the work." It felt like a mystery narration of my own life was happening in real time. I wasn't just working for money anymore, I was working to prove this invisible mentor right. I felt like I was being watched by a version of myself that had already won, someone who knew that every sacrifice I made for David and Elena was a brick in a foundation that would eventually hold up a skyscraper. Have you ever felt like you were being guided by a force you couldn't see, but could definitely feel? The climax came on a winter night when the furnace finally died. David was shivering, Elena was trying to heat water on a camping stove, and I felt like the ultimate failure. I had $500 in the bank and the repair was going to be $2,000. I sat on the basement stairs, head in my hands, ready to admit defeat and move us into a shelter. I felt a draft. I looked up and saw a piece of paper stuck to the vent. Check the old toolbox in the shed. The blue one. I ran out into the snow, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found the blue toolbox, buried under years of junk. Inside, wrapped in an old oily rag, was a stack of bills, exactly $1,500, and a final note. This one was different. It wasn't a quote or a tip. It was a confession. The handwriting shifted as it went on, losing its practiced elegance and becoming shaky, familiar. It was David's. My father, the man I thought was oblivious to my struggle, had been the one leaving the notes. He had been a clerk at a high-end law firm 40 years ago, before the mill took his health, and he had kept that stationery like a relic. The money wasn't magic, it was the emergency fund he had been adding to, dollar by dollar, for 30 years, waiting for the moment I was truly ready to lead. The note didn't offer a tip or a quote this time. It simply said, "I never doubted the man you were becoming. I just wanted to make sure you didn't doubt him either." The garage door creaked open, and David stood there, silhouetted against the dim porch light. He looked older than 56, his shoulders curved from years of labor, but his eyes were sharp. I held up the note, my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to ask him why the mystery? Why let me struggle through the dark alone if he had the words to guide me all along? He didn't apologize. He walked over and sat on an old crate beside me, his joints popping in the silence. He explained that a man who was given a map never learns to read the stars. He had seen me ready to quit a dozen times, and he knew that if he just handed me the money or the answers, I would always be dependent on someone else's strength. He wanted me to find my own. He had used his old law clerk stationery because it felt official, a way to make his internal belief in me feel like a command from the universe. He didn't give me the money or the advice openly because he knew I needed to believe I was doing it on my own. He knew that the only way I would become the man who could carry the family was if I learned to listen to that inner voice, the one he simply amplified with a few scraps of paper. He had been my life story's silent narrator all along. I didn't tell him I knew. I just fixed the furnace, finished the project that turned into a career, and eventually gave them the house they deserved. But I kept every single note. They taught me that success isn't a solo journey, it's fueled by the quiet sacrifices of those who came before us. This emotional story isn't about the money I made, it's about the man my father helped me become by simply refusing to let me quit. Do you think it's more powerful to get help openly, or to be pushed forward by someone who stays in the shadows? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. If this storytelling video touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more narrated stories about the hidden heroes in our lives.